Hello, everyone. Let's get started. Thank you for joining this event. Welcome to the online meetup of the AWS Budapest Community of Practice, or COP for short. I'm Fanny. I'm one of the co-organizers of this meetup group, and I'm going to be the host of today's session. We regularly organize events like this, so if you want to keep up with the latest news and technologies around AWS, join our community to learn from fellow clouders and other experts of the field. And before we start, let me give the stage to the organizer of the meetup group, Árpád Tóth, to tell us more a bit about the main partner of the meetup group.
Thank you, Fanny, and hello, everyone. Yes, as you said, my name is Árpád Tóth. Don't be confused. I'm not the speaker of today. The speaker is Árpád Tóth. We're just having similar names. But anyhow, I'm so glad to be here today to welcome you and also to talk about our sponsor, Deutsche Telekom IT Solutions, or DTITS in short. This company is the largest ICT employer in Hungary, member of the Deutsche Telekom Group, which is one of the biggest telco company in the world. And the group is actually active both in B2B and B2C. And in case of DTITS Hungary, it serves international customers, mostly in Europe, in the areas of software development, system integration, cloud operations, and of course, telecommunications as well. DTITS is a workplace that professional the development and knowledge sharing is having a very key aspect and very important for the company. It actively supports the operation of this AWS community and others as well by providing resources, often contribute to the life of the community with the expert speakers. Therefore, if you are interested in more on that, please check the website if you want to learn more about DTITS Hungary. And I guess let's get this started. Fanny, back to you.
Thank you. I have just a few more technical information. As you may have heard at the beginning of this session, today's session is being recorded. So please keep that in mind if you decide to join our Q&A session, if you decide to ask your question vocally. Also, if you miss anything, don't worry, because within a few weeks, the recording of this event will be available on our YouTube channel called Clouders Club, where you can rewatch this whole session. Also, you can find our previous, the recording of our previous meetups as well, if you're interested. And that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention. And with that, I'd like to give the floor to our first speaker, Lydia. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Fanny, for the stage, and let's get started. Hello, everyone. Today I would like to share with you what I've learned regarding securing generative AI. So I would like to show you how generative AI security scoping metrics looks like and how it works. But first, let me change. How many of you are familiar with Google Translate? Because this is a really typical example of generative AI. I come from Slovakia and I usually type in Slovak text and it generates English text for me. Google Translate launched in 2006, so we've been using it for 18 years. Crazy, isn't it? And what about the Siri? Siri launched in 2011. Usually it was, or back then when I remember, it was a big sensation. You say, hey, Siri, set an alarm, Siri will do it for you, and then you can have a nice conversation, sometimes not because she don't understand you, but that's obviously not your fault. It's not so sophisticated as ChatGPT, but it was here in 2011. And what about completion? I think we all know it. When we are searching for something, we just start typing and several suggestions pop up, like, for example, artificial flowers. Why not? What I'm trying to say here is that generative artificial intelligence is definitely not a new concept. It's been here around for a while. My name is Lydia Delyova. I have 10 plus years experience in IT field. I have a solid Unix background. I started experiencing AWS in 2020, and I'm currently working as a DevOps engineer inside the reliability engineering team. I'm holding multiple AWS certification. I'm co-organizer also of AWS user group in Košice, and I'm brand new community builder in category networking and content delivery. I also participated at program called AWS New Voices program, and I will share the details at the end of the presentation, so stay tuned. So let's get quickly through the agenda. As was already mentioned, I would like to show you how security scoping metrics looks like and how it works. Then we will talk about scope determination, we will cover security disciplines, and then we dive deeper into security controls. So here it is. Here is your mental model to classify use cases. As you can see, there are 5 logical organizations called scopes. Scopes are numbered 1 to 5, representing least ownership to greatest ownership. Each scope has a unique name, like consumer application, enterprise application, pre-trained, fine-tuned, or self-trained models. Within each scope, you can see several service offerings, and each of these has different software, access, a data model, or infrastructure. The model also, or the metrics also summarize key security disciplines, which are governance and compliance, legal and privacy, risk management, controls, and resilience, and they are spread over all the scopes. We'll talk about these security disciplines later. Now, imagine that your customer just made a decision that he wants to move forward with generative AI solution. So the first thing you need to understand, or you need to know, is you need to determine which scope your use case fits into. There are 2 scenarios: if your customer is buying generative AI, or if your customer is building generative AI. If it's buying generative AI, you will work with scope 1 or scope 2. So if your business case is using third-party public generative AI services, then your business case fits into scope 1. It means it doesn't matter if it's paid or free. It means that you don't own data, nor training data, nor model. You can modify it or augment it. A typical example of service offering is SpartyRock or ChatGPT, we all know. Use case: an employee interacts with the generative AI chat application to generate ideas for an upcoming marketing campaign. If your business case fits into scope 2, called enterprise application, and then that it means that your business is using a third-party enterprise application with generative AI features. There is definitely a business relationship between your organization and the vendor. Example, Amazon Code Whisperer. Use case: you use a third-party enterprise scheduling application that has a generative AI capability embedded within to help draft meeting agendas. The second scenario is that your customer is building generative AI. If your customer is building generative AI, then you will move in scope 3, 4, or 5. If your business case fits into scope 3, that means your customer is building its own application on already existing generative AI foundation model. For example, Amazon Bedrock-based models. You build an application to create customer support chatbot that uses an Anthropic Cloud Foundation model through the Amazon Bedrock APIs. If your business case fits into scope 4, then it means that your business is refining already existing generative AI foundation model by fine-tuning it with its own data. So it's, for example, Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart. Using an API to access a foundation model, you build an application for your marketing teams that enables them to build specific marketing materials. The last one, your business is building or training a model from scratch on its own data. For example, SageMaker. Your business wants to create a model trained exclusively on deep industry-specific data to license to companies in that industry, creating a completely novel LM. So now your workload is scoped and you need to enable your business to move forward, yet securely. So I think it's a time to talk about security disciplines. As was already mentioned, those security disciplines are spread all over the scopes. There are 5: governance and compliance, legal and privacy, risk management, controls, and resilience. Government and compliance are policies, procedures, and reporting needed to empower your business. So back to scopes. If your business fits into scope 1 or 2, then you need to pay attention to terms of services, licensing, data sovereignty, and other legal disclosure. If your use case fits into scope 3, 4, and 5, that means that you are using your data to train or fine model, then you really need to understand data classifications and data types of assets the solution will have access to. I would recommend here to use extra security layer in form of RAG, which is a retrieval augmented generation. RAG just lets you use your data without having to change a model or train model. So you can put your data as part of input, as part of the prompt, and it will help AI to understand the concept, and then it will generate the better answer for you. The advantage for you is that you don't mix your data with the model. The second security discipline is legal and privacy. It's specific regulatory, legal and privacy requirements. For example, end user licensing agreements, term of services, European GDPR, like right to be forgotten or right to erasure. Here I would like to mention that the only effective way how you can delete your data from a train model is to remove them from a train set and then just train a new version of the model. The third security disciplines is risk management. Risk management is just identification of possible threats. There is a lot of way how to identify possible risk, but they are two common mechanisms like risk assessment and threat modeling. When you are using or when your business case fits into scope 1 and 2, that means that you are buying a third-party application. Then you just check that you understand all risks that might come with using this third-party application, and you agree with the procedure how the provider will deal with them. If your use case fits into scope 3, 4, 5, then implement threat modeling. Threat actors are using a technique called prompt injection. It means that they carefully craft input to modify response of a large language model in unexpected or undesired way. For example, by this, the threat actors can gain sensitive data, or they can gain access to internal systems. The fourth discipline is control. So it means implementation of security controls to mitigate risk. It's a different color because we will talk about it later. And the last one is resilience. This is how to architect the generative AI to meet business SLAs or to maintain availability. So now we can go to step 2. So after we have determined our scope, now security teams can really focus on the controls that apply to the scope. Here you can see a flow diagram. The colors indicate who has control over the elements in the diagram. So here in scope 1 and 2, we can see that the customer has control over its data, and all other elements are under control of provider, of a foundation model, or of application. How the diagram works. Here we can see also implemented rack. So generative AI application gain input in form of prompt from the user. It can optionally query data from customer data via plugin. And that means that the generative AI application will format together prompt from the user and energy data from the customer data. And then they will send it to the model to process them to generate the correct answer. Doesn't matter if it's fine-tuned model or pre-trained model. After model do completion, then it's sent to application, and application will send it back to the user. Here on the right, you can see controls that can be applied in scope 1 and scope 2. For example, if you want to have control over traffic from your company to the public internet, you can implement web proxy, or you can web proxy to detect the enforce controls. Or you can maybe implement possible access controls. In scope 3, you can see that customer has control over generative AI application in addition. That is why, back to scope 3, it means that that customer or your use case is creating its own application on already existing generative AI foundation model. That's why customer here also owns or have control over generative AI application. Then you can see that provider has control only on training data or pre-trained model. The controls that can be implemented here are you can control who can use specific foundation models, or you can control access to inference endpoints, or you can also implement web application firewall or data loss prevention, which can be useful to filter malicious or sensitive inputs. Moving to scope 4, you can see that the customer has also control over fine-tuning data and fine-tune model. That is because the scope 4 itself is working like your business case is refining already existing generative AI by fine-tuning with its own data. So the controls that can be implemented here are the same as controls from scope 3, plus protect the model artifacts and inference endpoints. Here we have it named. Inference endpoints can be identity and access management, encryption, and monitoring. The last one is scope 5. That means that your business case is building and training, tuning application on its own data. So that's why you can see here then customer has control over the elements in the diagram. So here you can implement all the controls from scope 3 and scope 4. So now I think we have covered the topic, securing generative AI. So we covered how a generative AI security scope and metrics looks like, how to determine the correct scope for your use case, what are security disciplines, and also we went through these security controls. Now I would like to share with you some information regarding the program I participated in at the beginning of the year. It's called AWS New Voices program. This is an initiative that was launched to gather potential speakers from AWS community pool. How it was announced in a special channel on Slack. We just received the information that this program is about to open and the participants can apply. So I did. I didn't expect anything. But finally I was chosen and I participated at this 6 weeks taking online program. This year it has around 300 participants. The goal of this program is that they want to encourage participants to feel confident while public speaking. It's led by coaches. The coaches are AWS ambassadors, AWS heroes, user group leaders, also AWS employees, and all of them are just volunteers. Each week we had one session. The beginning of the session, it's like on the picture, we were everywhere there, and then we were divided into a breakout session for attendees of 3 or 4 participants, and there was 1 or 2 coach present as well. On each session, everyone had a speech of like taking 3 minutes, and we get the feedback from the coach and also from the other attendees what we could make better for the next time. The graduation of this program is that you need to have a public event speech. It doesn't matter if it's a webinar or in person. So that's also the reason why I am here. And it don't finish like with the program because we still have a channel on a Slack, and we are supporting each other like with practicing our public speeches and so on. We are all working on our public speaker way. So that is it. That's everything from me, and hope you gain some knowledge from this, and I'm ready for your questions. So what was your main takeaway from the program? Was it more the skill base or the networking aspect? I think it was skill based because I didn't mention each week we got some like I don't know, some hook or some materials to practice. So and then each other week we need to build the layer on the top. So at the end, from just like introduction, how it should look like or something like that, we at the end of the program ended with the same topic but in different layers, and it became like a 5-minute talk. And yeah, I think the main takeaway was the structure of the presentation, how to, I think important is like introduction, but how to gain attention of the attendees. That was the thing that I never knew, something I need to implement like that. So yeah, that one was for me really crucial to learn. Hope I answered the question. Yeah, thank you for zooming. Where can I find requirements to join the AWS New Voices program, and also share the Slack channel details you mentioned? Yeah, the Slack channel, you can't join like by yourself. You need to be invited to the Slack channel. So you need to became a community builder, or you need to become AWS user group leader. So you can't join it by yourself. Sorry for that. And the requirements, there are no requirements. Just if you really want to make some progress in your public speeches, then just if you are part of the channel, of course, just apply. I think they chose everyone. It wasn't like yes, somebody wasn't chosen because they have full capacity. So no requirements, just willing to learn. Any idea for implementing security on DevSecOps with AWS resource within CI/CD pipeline? That's a tough one. Yeah, I don't have answer for you right now, but if you just drop the email, I can get back to you with the answer. Yeah, let me double check with a colleague of mine.
Thank you again, Lydia, for your exciting presentation. And now it's time for our next speaker to lead us into the world of serverless security. So, Árpád, the stage is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fanny. Let me just share my screen quickly. All right. So, can you hear me and can you see my screen that says serverless security concepts? I will talk about some serverless security concepts. This talk will be about level 200 if you are familiar with the AWS presentation scale. It means that I won't really go deep into services and service configurations, but some familiarity with services like Lambda, API Gateway, or Cognito will be required. So I divided this talk into 3 parts. In the first part, I will talk about some general security concepts and how we can apply those to serverless architectures and serverless applications. Everything that I will talk about in this part will be AWS best practices. Next, I will mention 4 ways to control access to our applications. So we are going to secure our API gateway endpoints, and I will demo some of them there. And lastly, I will mention some AWS certifications that we can get to validate our serverless or security, or to combined knowledge. And of course, at the end, we will have our Q&A session. But before doing that, let me introduce myself. So my name is Árpád. I'm a cloud engineer / cloud consultant. And similarly to Lydia, I'm an AWS community builder, and I'm also an AWS authorized instructor. But this wasn't always the case. So I used to be a mathematics teacher, and I transitioned into IT, and I became a developer. I've been working with AWS technologies for about six years now, and I still do this today. I just finished my 2nd year of being a community builder, so hopefully I can start my 3rd year soon. The decision should be out next week or maybe the week after. And I just started my 2nd year as an authorized instructor as well. I'm a proud father of 3 beautiful, beautiful and smart teenage girls. One of them is actually already an adult, but she's still under 20, so I still call her a teenager. And in my free time, I like being in my garden, and I know that it's not as exotic as scuba diving or rock climbing, but it's at least as sorry. It's at least as satisfying as you can see on these images. So let's start the first part and let's talk about some serverless security principles. But the question is, why do we need to talk about that? How is it different from traditional network security or even virtual network security, like security in the VPC? There are many differences. I just listed a few here. One of the first differences is that a serverless application uses many resources. Serverless applications usually map to microservices. So on this diagram, I just have 3 microservices. We have service 1, service 2, and service 3. They might connect to third-party applications because they need some data from there. If we zoom in to service 1, for example, then we'll see that that service will consist of an API gateway, many Lambda functions, database, for example, DynamoDB, or S3 bucket, and so on, so forth. So what it means that now we have an increased boundary. So it's not just the point of entry to our application, but we have many services to protect. So we have an increased perimeter that we need to protect. Another reason is that serverless applications are usually developed in an agile environment. So we might deploy our code multiple times a day. So that means that we live in a fast development cycle. So we have to be extra careful what we put in our code, application code, and we have to double check our dependencies as well. And the last thing that I mentioned here, again, there are many more, is specific to Lambda function that it runs in an ephemeral or temporary environment. So whenever there is a trigger to run our code, then Lambda service will provision an execution environment. Now that execution environment will be alive for some time, a few minutes. And then that execution environment will be destroyed. Of course, there can be other invocations during that execution environment, while the execution environment is up. But if something happens here, then we simply can't go back later to check what happened, because that environment does not exist anymore. Lambda service will destroy it. So that's why it's important that we have a robust logging and monitoring solution. So the question is, how do we do this? And what should we protect at all? Now, here we have a simple and sample serverless application that consists of an API gateway. So that's going to be the point of contact. So this is going to be the point of entry to our application. This is where we let our users in. So we have authenticated users. For example, this user is Alice. She's authenticated, meaning that she has entered her username and password. So we want her request to proceed. But we have unauthenticated users, like Bob, who we do not want to access our fantastic application. But it's not just that. So we have Lambda functions, we have DynamoDB tables, we have S3 buckets, and we have other services as well. So what should we do? How can we protect these services? And how should we approach this serverless application from security point of view? And this is where AWS is first recommendation comes to the picture, that we should protect everything. And this concept is called defense in depth. Now, this is not an AWS related term, but AWS also recommends that. I listed a couple of services here. There are many more, so I didn't want to put them all up there. And let's just talk about these for a few seconds. So I will talk about Cognito as one way to control access to our API gateway. So we protect our application using Cognito. But how about other services? How about the API gateway service as is? For example, we can attach a CloudFront distribution for the API gateway. So CloudFront can do at least two things for us. First, it can improve security. Second, it can improve performance. We can use a WAF, web application firewall, and attach it to the API gateway. A WAF is a OSI layer 7 firewall, which means that it will inspect application level properties, like it can inspect headers, body size, it can protect us against SQL injection. It has many rule groups for various operating systems like Linux, Windows, and many, many, many more. Moving on to the backend, here we have a Lambda function. Now, one critical thing is secrets. So a Lambda function needs to connect to, for example, to a database. How can we manage our secrets? We need connection strings, for example. As a developer, I've seen codes where secrets were embedded into the application code. Now, according to AWS, this is not a good practice. So AWS recommends that we should use dedicated services for this. For example, Secrets Manager, which is really great for storing database credentials, or Systems Manager Parameter Store. And when the Lambda function needs those secrets, the function can fetch them from these resources. So, and when the secrets are there, the Lambda function can use them. That is one thing. The other thing is controlling access to the service itself. So it's not the application, but the service itself. Who can invoke that Lambda function? Who can add an item to a DynamoDB table? Who can download objects from an S3 bucket? And this is where IAM policies come to the picture. IAM stands for Identity and Access Management, and it's a global service. So that means that if you go to the AWS console, in the top right corner, and you want to select the region, you won't be able to do that because it will say global. So that means that if we have AWS users like Alice, for example, Alice can create resources in every region if we allow her to do so. So IAM is a very robust service, and it handles a lot of requests. Can you guess how many requests does IAM handle per second? So how many requests do you think IAM handles every second? 300? Yeah. 3 million? Yeah. Okay. A lot more. So IAM handles approximately 500 million requests per second. So 500 million requests per second. So that's a lot. IAM is a very robust service. And we can use IAM to control access to API gateway as well. And I will talk about that later. So we can use IAM policies to control who or which resource can access our AWS resources. We can attach these policies to identities, for example, users, groups, and roles, or we can attach them to resources like Lambda function or DynamoDB. This is a new thing, by the way, resource policies in DynamoDB, or even S3. So we call these bucket policies. Now, moving on, we want to control who can read our data, who can see what we saved to a database or what objects we uploaded to an S3 bucket. And this is where server-side encryption or encryption at rest will show. By default, these services already encrypt data that we write on them by using their service-specific AWS managed keys. But if we want to fine-grain that control, we can create customer managed keys or CM keys in a service called KMS, Key Management Service. We can just configure that Alice can read that specific folder in an S3 bucket, but Bob can't. And lastly, I already mentioned the importance of logging and monitoring. So we can use a couple of tools here. So for example, we can use CloudWatch logs and metrics. We can use X-Ray for tracing. So with X-Ray, we can actually follow the request from the points of entry to the downstream resources. And the last thing that I want to mention here is CloudTrail, which is very, very important. CloudTrail is like the surveillance camera or the CCTV for our environment. So it sees and records everything that happens inside an AWS environment. It records every single API call. So AWS recommends that we should always have CloudTrail logging turned on. And we should apply guardrails or controls that prevents users from turning logging off. And I will mention that in a minute. So that was the first part, the defense in depth. Now let's see what else does AWS recommend. So we have a policy here. So this is a JSON object. It's an IAM policy. What does this policy do? What does this policy do? Does anyone want to share what this policy does in the chat? Allows everything on all buckets. Absolutely, yeah. So this policy will allow everything, the wildcard character, on S3, on every possible S3 resources. So far, so good. What's wrong with this policy? If there's anything wrong, what's wrong with this policy? Too permissive, absolutely. So 100%. So this policy is too permissive. So this policy is too permissive. And it's very easy to write policies like this because we just put the wildcard in there and yeah, there we go. It's all good. It works, right? But if we write S3 policies like this, then we can get into a situation like these large companies here. These are some headlines from the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, where large companies got their S3 buckets exposed due to misconfiguration. So what does AWS recommend? AWS recommends that we use the least privilege principle. The least privilege principle means that we should only add the permission to the user group or role that is absolutely necessary to do their job and not more. AWS also recommends a couple of actual steps to apply the least privilege principle. I just listed 5 of them. There are more, of course. Avoid using wildcards. Already talked about that. Next one is 1 role per Lambda function. So AWS recommends that we should use a separate role for each Lambda function. If we have just 1 role, it's a policy, and then we have multiple Lambda functions, and then we attach that policy to these Lambda functions, Now, this might not be ideal. Why? Because these Lambda functions might have different responsibilities. They will need different permissions. And what happens? We have to put those permissions into that one single policy again. And then we are back to the S3 policy issue. So our policy will be too permissive. So AWS recommends that we should use one role for each Lambda function. Use automations and tools where possible. For example, we can use IAM access analyzer. So IAM access analyzer, which alerts us if our resource is exposed to someone who's not in our trusted zone. A trusted zone could be an account or an AWS organizations. Talking about an AWS organization, it's also best practice to use multiple accounts. And AWS organizations is a great way to manage multiple accounts. Production accounts should definitely be separated. Why? Because there are multiple reasons, but one reason is that we will reduce the blast radius by that. It means that if something bad happens in an environment, that it won't spread to other environments or other applications. So AWS recommends that we should use multiple accounts, at least one per environment, but it's even better to use one per environment and one per application. As said, AWS organizations or control tower, which is an abstraction over AWS organizations, can help us with this. And the last thing is guardrails or controls. I already mentioned that we should have controls that disables, that prevents users from turning CloudTrail logging off. Service control policies, or SCPs, are a great way to do that, and Control Tower has some built-in service control policies. With service control policies, we can even restrict the root user of a managed account to do certain things. So, for example, even the root user cannot turn off CloudTrail logs. So that was the first part. Now let's focus on the application control. So let's see how we can control access to our applications. Now, our application, serverless application, will be fronted by an API gateway. Now, everything that I say in this section will be for REST type API gateways. So everything is for REST type API gateways. So one way is that we use a Cognito authorizer. So for this, we will need a Cognito user pool. The Cognito user pool is an identity provider, which is basically just a database for user credentials, username, password, is multi-factor authentication enabled, forgotten password, self-sign-up, and many, many other things. With this technique, API gateway will validate the token that comes from Cognito. If we have a custom authorization scheme, then we can use a Lambda authorizer. So if we protect our endpoint with the Lambda authorizer, which is just the normal Lambda function, API gateway will invoke that Lambda function every time when that endpoint is hit. Let's forget about caching now. So let's take caching out of the equation now. The Lambda authorizer will decide if that request is legit. So if that request should proceed or should be denied. If we have services, microservices, for example, talking to each other, then IAM, Identity and Access Management authorization could be a great option. It's a simple and very secure way to authorize requests between services. And the last one uses Amazon verified permissions, a Cognito user pool, and the Lambda authorizer. So this one is kind of a mixture of the some of the previous methods. Now this is a new feature. It just came out 2 weeks ago, maybe 3. In this case, Amazon verified permissions which is a security service, will make the authorization decision. I will demo this in a minute. So let's see these a little bit more in detail. So we have a Cognito authorizer first, and our user Alice uses a fantastic application. So she enters her username and her password, and then the application will call Cognito's authorize and token endpoints. Cognito will respond with some tokens. It will respond with an access token and an ID token. It also returns a refresh token, but it's not part of this talk now. Then the application will call the endpoint with one of the tokens, and then API gateway will contact Cognito user pools. Hey, we have a token. Is it valid? Then API gateway will validate that. If it's okay, the request will proceed. If not, the request will be denied. If we have a custom authorization scheme, for example, we use a third-party identity provider, I don't know, maybe Auth0, or we have an identity provider solution ourselves, and our token is not JWT, but like a custom token. Then what we can use is a Lambda authorizer. The flow will be very similar. So Alice will authenticate. The identity provider will return the tokens. Application will call the endpoint, and the Lambda authorizer will validate and verify the token. And it will also check if Alice is authorized to call the backend on that endpoint. The Lambda authorizer will return an IAM policy. So that's an IAM policy. If Alice can call the backend, Lambda function must return an allow element, or the effect element should be allow. Otherwise, it should be deny. API gateway will let the request go through if the decision is allow. Otherwise, it will deny the request. On this diagram, we have two services. So we have service 1 and service 2. So let's say that service 1 has a Lambda function that runs its business logic, and it needs some pieces of data from service 2. So what this Lambda function can do is that it can call the other services API gateway. This is our best practice. So it's not a good practice to call Lambdas directly from another Lambda. We can use identity and access management to authorize that request. So what we need to do in here, we need to set the authorization type in API gateway as IAM, and then we need two more things. So first, we need permissions for that Lambda function, permissions to call this API gateway in the other service. And the second thing, so that's number 2, is that we should sign the request with AWS's signature protocol called Signature v4, Signature version 4, SIG v4. AWS SDKs have methods to do this. So for example, if you use Node.js at the backend, then you probably use Axios. So Axios requests can be automatically signed using these SDK methods. And lastly, let's see this new feature when we use AWS Amazon verified permissions along with Cognito and the Lambda authorizer. The flow will be very similar. So we have a Cognito user pool, the identity provider, but here we have user groups in Cognito. So for example, we have an admin group, we have a read-only group, and we have other groups set up in Cognito. So let's say that we put Alice in the admin group, we put Bob in the read-only group. And then the application will call the endpoint with either the ID token or the access token. It does not matter which one, because both tokens contain the Cognito group info. But we have to configure that ahead of time. So if you configure verified permissions with access tokens, we cannot use ID tokens. Then API gateway will run the Lambda authorizer, but in this case, Lambda will not make the decision itself. Instead, it will call Amazon verified permissions decision endpoint. And that decision endpoint is called isAuthorizedWith token. So Lambda function needs to send that token to verified permissions, and then the verified permission service will come back with a decision based on its policies. I will show you this in a second. If it's allowed or denied, then the Lambda authorizer will put allow in the IAM policy. If the decision is allowed, then the request will proceed. Otherwise, it's going to be denied. All right, so let's do some demo. So I would like to show you two out of those 4 ways. So the setup is the following. We have a very simple serverless application. This is a joke application, and we have an API gateway called joke API. Now, this is called joke API because it will return jokes. So the first part of the application has a /dead endpoint, and it's a get endpoint. So this endpoint will return dead jokes. I configured API gateway with a Cognito authorizer in this case. And API gateway will expect an access token. Now that access token must have a scope claim, a scope property, and the joke API /read claim must be in the access token. If that claim is not in the token, or we use an ID token, which does not have scope properties at all, because ID tokens job is doesn't have anything to do with authorization. It carries information about the user itself. Then API gateway will decline the request. If we use an access token and the scope property has the joke API /read string, then API gateway will let the request go through. So let's see that very quickly. So I have a postman in here. So let me just quickly show you the access token. Okay, is it large enough? Can you see that? Everybody? Give me a thumbs up or a +1 if you can read that. Yep, okay, cool. So I hope that my token hasn't expired. So we have test user number 1. So this is the name of our user. And then we have an access token. So token use access. And here, this is the scope property. And the scope property has the joke API /read string. So based on this endpoint should work, because we use access token and the claim is there. Now let's see what happens. So here we are. This is the /dead endpoints. We use the access token. Let's invoke that. And indeed, what did the C say to the send? We have to stop meeting like this. Well, I don't think I can add anything to that. So this one clearly worked. But how about using an ID token? An ID token does not have the claim, does not have the scope claim. So this one here, this one is an ID token, and if you look at the properties, there are no scope properties. So based on this request should fail if we use the ID token, and again we get unauthorized. So that was the Cognito authorizer. So now let's see the second part of the demo that uses Amazon verified permissions. So we have 2 more endpoints in this fantastic application. We have a get Chuck endpoint, and that endpoint returns Chuck Norris jokes. And then we have a post Chuck endpoint where we can add new Chuck Norris jokes to the application. Again, we have a Cognito user pool, and I configured verified permissions with an access token. And we have these 2 groups in Cognito identity pools. We have a read-only group that has 1 user, test user 2, and that test user 2 can only read the jokes. We have an admin group 2 in Cognito, And test user 1 is in the admin group, and test user 1 can both read jokes and can add jokes to the database. Not everybody can add Chuck Norris jokes, of course. So, oops, sorry, not this one here. So as I said, both ID tokens and access tokens contain the Cognito group's information. Now, this is an ID token, but yeah, believe me, the access token also has the same Cognito group's claim. So let's see if we can get a fantastic Chuck Norris joke. And there we go. Some people wear Superman pajamas. Superman wears Chuck Norris pajamas. That's really, really awesome. And let's see if we can add Chuck Norris jokes. And let me just try to add this one. Chuck Norris can divide by 0. So as a former mathematics teacher, I find this really amazing. So let's see if test user 1 can add that. Yeah, so another fantastic Chuck Norris joke added. Now, if I used test user number 2 in here, then test user 2 would not be able to add jokes. It will only be able to read jokes. And this is because Amazon Verified Permissions needs to have a policy store and some policies written in CEDAR policy language. So the admin group has the following policy in Amazon Verified Permissions. So this is the Cognito user pool ID, and I covered up. So this policy says that if a user in the admin group from this Cognito user pool calls the joke API, then they can add jokes and read jokes. The read-only group has the following policy. If a user in the read-only group from this particular Cognito user pool calls the joke API, then that user can call the get Chuck endpoint. So that's why users in the read-only group won't be able to call the post endpoint, because that action is not enabled here. So that was the demo, and let's quickly talk about some AWS certifications. So first, why am I talking about AWS certification? So why can I be an authentic person to talk about that? I currently have these certifications. Some of them are certified. So on some of them I have recertified. So I have taken a couple of AWS exams. So I just want to share some quick tips and tricks that I use. So maybe they will be useful for you as well. I collected those certifications here that either contain serverless or security. So first, obviously, the security specialty, which is a specialty exam. So its price tag is at the specialty and pro level. It's not only serverless security, but AWS security overall. That is KMS keys, IAM policies, security groups, network ACS, everything that is security. You can take the DevOps Engineer Pro exam. It has some serverless questions, and it also has a security domain. But my favorite is definitely the Developer Associate exam. So it's an associate exam, so we have less time to complete the exam, but the price is less, so it's $150 now. Now this exam is almost exclusively about serverless. Lots of API gateway, lots of Lambda, lots of DynamoDB questions, and it also has security parts as well. If you don't want to pay for the exams, but you still want to validate your knowledge, then you can go to AWS Skill Builder, and then you can take the serverless knowledge path, and you can get a serverless knowledge badge. It's entirely free. And you don't have to go over the courses. If you don't want to, you can go straight to the assessment. It's also okay, and you will get the Credly badge if you are successful in the assessment. Now, these are some resources that I used when I prepared for some of these certifications. They might work for you, or you might have other resources as well. And finally, let me share some tips and tricks. Now, mandatory disclaimer: these worked for me. They might not work for you, so you know yourself. So you need to adjust these or need to add extra strategies. So first of all, I like to have solid foundations when I take an AWS exam. What does it mean? It means that that we can take exams by just memorizing exam-like questions, right? So if you went to uni, yeah, probably know that. But I don't like that way. So I like to have at least a basic knowledge on the domain, and then when I study for the exam, I like to build on that knowledge. I also like to have some structured learning plan. What does it mean? It could be either a ramp-up guide. AWS has these for each exam. It could be a skill-based learning plan. It could be an online course. There are many content providers out there who offer certification exam preparation courses. Unfortunately, I'm not the person who reads the documentation and just remembers it. So I'm always jealous of those people who read something once and they remember it. So unfortunately, I'm not like that. I need to see it. I need to experience it. So I like doing workshops. AWS has free workshops. I mean, free in the sense that you don't have to pay for them, but if you do them on your own account, yeah, there are some costs, obviously. Sometimes I come up with own ideas. Just like to play with the services. I found that very useful. I like using practice exams. And it's not because I want to know the questions ahead of time. This is unrealistic. It won't ever happen because exam questions are under NDA. But the reason why I like using practice questions is that I want to know how complex that exam is. So to me, a practice exam is good if it matches the real exam's complexity level. So for example, if the practice exam has a one-line question and then just 4 answer options, 1 word each, when the real exam has 2 paragraphs as a question and then 1 paragraph answer options, then in my opinion, that practice exam is not good. There are really good practice exams out there though. I like drawing architecture diagrams. I'm a visual type of person. Again, I just simply can't remember what I just read even yesterday. So I like drawing diagrams. So when I learn about some new concepts, I always try to draw it and just see that. AWS exams are not very factual, but we still need to know a couple of basic facts. For example, DynamoDB read capacity units, or write capacity units, or Lambda timeout. Because, for example, we can get a question like this, that we have a workload that runs for 30 minutes. And one of the options in the answer is that you use a Lambda function. So can we use a Lambda function to run a workload that runs for 30 minutes? Can we use a Lambda function? No, because Lambda timeout is 15 minutes. So we need to know some very basic facts. The last 2 are not for preparation, but for the actual exam. Whenever possible, just prefer native solutions. There might be answer options like use a third-party service, or create a script that runs, I don't know, twice a day. These are usually, and I say usually not the right answers. They're usually a built-in native solution for that problem, and the same is true for service-to-service integration. So when we see that we create a script and we schedule a Lambda function to run it once a day, that's probably, again, not always, it's probably not the right answer. And the last trick that I do when I take an AWS exam is that when I get stuck on a question, because I get stuck, so however much I want, how much I want to avoid, I will always get a question that I can't answer. So there are people who do 100% in an AWS exam. I'm not that. So there are always questions that I can't answer. So what I do is that I simply mark those questions for review. There's a button that you can do, that you can just check and mark these questions for review. So when you finished answering the 65 questions or even the 75 questions if you take the pro exam, then you can go back at the end and just focus on those questions that you marked for review. That's it from me. So let's do some Q&A. So I open it up for questions if there are any questions. Fanny, should I stop? Should I stop sharing just to see?
No, it's fine. I can read the questions for you.
Okay, no worries, please.
Okay,
do so.
So we actually got two. The first one is both are actually about the certifications. So which certification do you recommend taking first?
Okay, well, it depends. So if you already have AWS experience, then you might be okay to go to the Solutions Architect Associate exam straight away. I did that when I started out because the Cloud Practitioner, which is an Essentials exam, did not exist back then. If you start out with AWS, you start out with cloud, you get yourself familiar with the services, then the Cloud Practitioner Essentials exam can be a great candidate. Otherwise, if you already have, if you've been working with AWS for, I don't know, a year or two, but you just didn't go and sit the exam, then yeah, probably Solutions Architect Associate exam. So I will start with the Solutions Architect Associate, then I will do the Developer Associate, and SysOps Admin, Security, and so on. I would definitely leave the Solutions Architect Professional as the last step. So that's definitely the toughest nut to crack. How much preparation do you need to pass the exams? Again, it depends. In my experience, I would approach these exams with humility. So that's my approach. So I always respect these exams and I prepare for these exams because there are always questions that are tricky. We are under time pressure. We have 65 questions and only 30 minutes left and 10 questions left. So I do my best to prepare. Again, it depends. In the beginning, I needed a few months, obviously, yeah, after work. So that was nights and weekends. So it took a few months to prepare for an exam. Now, with years of experience, that becomes a little bit less. But for example, if I study for a new domain, so for example, machine learning specialty exam, so that will be a couple of months time of journey. So again, it depends. It depends on your experience. It depends on your exam routine. But yeah, so be prepared for getting trick questions, and again, time is an issue. By the way, if you are a non-English speaker, so that means English is a second language, you can get extra 30 minutes. So you can get extra 30 minutes on the exam. So when you register yourself on the TNC Training and Certification page, then just tick that box. That's English is your second language. You will automatically get extra 30 minutes every time you take an exam. I hope that answers the question. And there's one more. Can I use a third-party authentication for API gateway? Yes. You can. If you use Cognito, then yeah, OECD compatible, SAML compatible solutions can work. Or if you use HTTP API, it has a authorizer type called JWT authorizer. So it does not have to be Cognito. So it could be other JWT token provider, for example, Auth0. I'm not familiar with Azure AD, so I can't answer that specific question. But the general answer is probably yes. But again, it depends on the use case. So have to check that. Hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you. I think that's all for the questions from the chat. So let me thank you both, Lydia and Árpád, for your insightful presentations today. And also thanks for everyone in the audience. We are very happy that you could join us today. And also I would like to thank the participants for joining us. Don't forget to join the AWS Budapest community of practice. So we can hopefully meet again. And remember, the recording of this meetup will be available on the Clouders Club YouTube channel in a few weeks. So yeah, thank you again, and have a very nice afternoon. Bye, everyone.